Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Huddle, KGUN9 streaming sports talk show. We come to you every week at this time. I'm KGUN9 sports director Jason Barr, joined by our main anchor, Pat Parris. Everybody can listen, watch, and or comment if they like. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
Doing pretty well, Jason. A lot going on, a lot of stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, for sure. And certainly we'll start with the Super Bowl. It is set, Super Bowl 57, and I am going to do something real fast here, Pat, before I continue. I'm going to step off and wipe something down.
Okay. Well, I'll continue. I'll talk about the big game odds. We can't.
There we go.
Can't put the Super Bowl.
All right.
Super Bowl.
I was looking a little fuzzy in my camera mic, and I don't want to look fuzzy for all the viewers.
Okay.
To be clean.
Well, you're in a tiny little box right now, but okay, that's fine.
And well, yes, we're good. Okay, Pat, Kansas City is going to take on Philadelphia. And I guess we're going to start here and look at the line. Pat, we don't need to make predictions right now because we still got a week to go. There's going to be tons of Super Bowl hype. But I thought it was interesting. Initially, I saw the line as a pick'em, and it looked like the Chiefs have now moved to a 1.5 underdog. Is that how you see it? And you don't have to pick the game, but just tell me first off, before we get to some of the controversy and things we want to talk about in the championship games, what were your initial thoughts on the Super Bowl line?
Well, originally, I think the moment that it was put out, some of the Super Bowl odds from Vegas actually had the Chiefs as a 1-point favorite. And then suddenly it swung to about 2.5 point favorite for the Eagles. It's settled in now at 1.5 for the Eagles.
And it's evolving. It's going to change.
It's going to change, and it changed dramatically. And I think, the perception, I'm not sure nationally what the perception is. I know my own perception is I think the Chiefs are the better team. I really do. And I think the Chiefs are going to win.
Even with that Eagles defense?
Yeah, I actually do. I really think they are. I think the Chiefs have faced some great defenses, and I think they've done well. I think give Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, Juju Smith-Schuster, give them some time to get healthy, 2 weeks instead of just 1 week. I really like their chances. We'll talk more about that next week.
Obviously nothing's got to get healthy more than Mahomes's high ankle sprain.
Mahomes, and you know what, Jason, except for the one time where he clearly kind of tweaked it a little bit, he continued to play and let him on the, let him to the drive that set up the field goal to win the game. So I was surprised that he played as well as or at least his foundation was as good as it was. I really was. I was impressed.
All right, I want to talk about the two controversies, if you will, coming out of the championship game, one in each. And first, we're going to start with the Chiefs and the Bengals. When I first saw the hit out of bounds on Mahomes that put them in field goal range to set up the winning field goal, my first thought, Pat, was you got to call it. I mean, he's obviously out of bounds. I mean, it's as clear as day. It's a personal foul. You just can't not call it. You've got to make the call. Then I had somebody else. I was listening to somebody else, Pat, and they were making a very strong case the other way. And what they said was, this was not a vicious hit. This was a guy who was running full speed at the end of the game. You don't want to put a situation here where the officials are deciding which team is going to the Super Bowl. They had obviously swallowed their whistle or made the decision or just missed the call on the clip, on the punt return, and a hold on the Mahomes run. If you're going to swallow your whistle or miss those calls there as a makeup call, don't call that. We deserved overtime for that game. And maybe think a little bit more that, hey, maybe the officials shouldn't have called it. My thought after that, Pat, was, hey, they should have called the clip and they should have called the and they should have called the hold, and this wouldn't have been an issue. Your thoughts on whether the referees made the right call there on Mahomes going out of bounds and the late hit?
That play could happen 1 million times. And it doesn't matter if it's Patrick Mahomes. It doesn't matter if it's McKinnon, a running back. It doesn't matter if it's, Kelsey, the tight end. That play, he was clearly out of bounds already, and he was knocked down by an opposing player 1 million times out of 1 million. That's going to be a personal foul. It doesn't matter. You can try to justify it one way or the other. They should have made other call. in that moment, that call will be made every single time. It wasn't even close.
Well, that's what I said. That's why my initial thought was. But I was swayed a little bit. Does it not sway you at all to
No,
say, hey,
no.
the officials are deciding which team goes to the Super Bowl? The officials should not be deciding what
But
team
in
goes
that
to the Super
moment,
Bowl, Pat.
in that moment, player safety is paramount, and that player safety issue came into play there. That
It
was
wasn't anything to the head.
that was a
It wasn't anything
the
vicious.
player is letting up as he goes out of bounds, and you give him a shove, and that there's all that, you know, all that stuff on the sidelines, from photographers to benches to first down markers. It's a dangerous play. That's why it's a penalty. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, Jason. And I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm not sitting here trying to. It wouldn't have mattered if that would happen the other reverse, if it was the Bengals. And it's not he's an injured player and we're trying to protect. They're not trying to protect the quarterback. When the quarterback gets out of the pocket and runs, they're fair game. They're not. The only thing they get benefit of is they can go into a slide and be protected. But other than that, no, he's fair game, except that he's not fair game because he was clearly not only the white line, the solid white that's the out of bounds.
Oh, there's no question he was out of bounds. Nobody's going to disagree with that, Pat.
It was.
But sometimes you swallow your whistle and let the players decide.
That's not the way it works. When there's an egregious personal foul like that, they have to call it.
But Pat, it's not the second preseason game.
Can you imagine the
officials
outrage?
Deciding who's going to the Super Bowl?
Doesn't matter, Jason. Can you imagine the outrage if you don't call that and he does get hurt? Or even if he doesn't get hurt, you don't make that call. You've got to make that call.
Well, they should have called the slipping call. They should have called
that
the
one is
call.
right in front of you. And you can look, the officiating in that game was terrible on both sides. And why that back judge, that when he came in to try to stop the play on that third down play, he comes in and then all of a sudden he stops and lets him continue with that play. And then it was 4 minutes of trying to decide what had happened. That back referee needed to stop that play immediately if he thought the play needed to be stopped, because the clock was not right. You know, the officiating was terrible. They missed calls. They let calls go, but that one you cannot let go.
Right. The other controversy in the NFC Championship game, and I tell you what, I wish I had texted you this at the time, because as soon as Brock Purdy got hurt and they brought in the second string quarterback, my initial reaction is this guy's going to get hurt too. It didn't matter how many quarterbacks they brought in. That offensive line could not stop the Eagles' defensive line. And no quarterback could do anything. And so they're complaining about them passing. They have to run the ball every single play. They had no pass protection. You would have had to drop back and fire it immediately. No quarterback would have not gotten hurt there. Any quarterback was running to his life. He had 2 seconds. Hassan Reddick and Ndamukong Suh off the bench, and anybody else coming from the Eagles, the 49ers had no pass protection whatsoever. I thought Christian McCaffrey might have been an interesting option just so they don't have to run the ball every single time. That's kind of what I would do. And before we get to the rule change, your thoughts on what the 49ers should have done on that day, on Sunday, or potential rule change.
First of all, the 49ers coaching staff blew it big time early in that game by not throwing a challenge flag on that fourth down catch when the receiver Smith hops up and immediately tries to get everybody to go fast because he knew he dropped.
No, I know, but we had no replay on that yet, though.
It didn't matter. I'm telling you, Jason, I saw. You could ask my wife. I said he didn't catch that, and then he jumped up and I said, "See, he didn't catch it." He's telling him, "I throw the challenge flag there because it's fourth down, and they converted an amazing first down that might not have been a catch."
Right, but that play didn't make the difference of the game, though.
Well, sure it did. If the 49ers get the ball there, and you got to, at that point, you still have a healthy quarterback. You
weren't going to have a healthy quarterback for long, Pat. They had no pass protection. No Jason, quarterback could stay healthy with that.
There are schemes of how you get the ball out quickly, and they didn't even have a chance to do that because Brock Purdy got hurt. And when he got hurt, you bring in a quarterback that's a journeyman that doesn't have any real experience of note.
Well, at least he had some mobility.
Yeah. Well, he might have had mobility, but he didn't have a clue of what he was doing. This is a guy that runs the practice squad every week. He doesn't know how to run that 49ers offense like a Brock Purdy would, or, the other starting quarterbacks that got knocked out for that team. The problem was the Eagles defense is fantastic. I'll give you that. But they knocked Brock Purdy out and the game was over. I mean, once that game was over, he got knocked out, that game was definitely over. There was no chance for the 49ers at that point.
I never liked the rule. Talk about things at the moment. I never liked the rule change anyway to go back to two quarterbacks.
I didn't either. I couldn't
That's
understand it, Jason.
no. I
You
mean,
and I both grew up with three
three
quarterbacks, and yeah,
quarterbacks.
one was originally, you and I were talking about this, and originally they designated the third quarterback as kind of the emergency quarterback, and there were some stipulations on when he could come into the game.
I didn't know that. I
But
was
yeah,
saying to you in the newsroom, I remember the '86 Super Bowl. I grew up in New Jersey. Is Phil Simms at quarterback? Jeff Rutledge was the backup, and Jeff Hostetler was third string, and Hostetler came in the game for the fake punt. You had three quarterbacks.
yeah, but I'm telling you, I don't know when they changed the rule, but there was a rule originally. You know, when they expanded rosters and they kept expanding rosters, and they said, okay, we'll give you a third quarterback, but he can't just come into the game. It's got to be the fourth quarter, or if both the other quarterbacks go down.
No,
That
I don't
was the
see why you need
original
that
attempt.
rule. Why do you need that? What's the point of that? You don't
Oh,
need
I
that
don't know.
rule.
I'm just saying I remember that rule. I'm not saying that's what I would
That
do,
seems
but
silly to me.
I would definitely say if you're on the 52-man roster, you should dress. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you know, if Garoppolo was healthy enough to maybe dress, but you didn't want to dress him, and you only going to dress two quarterbacks, well, then you get in a situation like this. I think they really should expand the roster and let you go to three quarterbacks. And do you think the players union or the NFL, anybody is going to say, no, don't dress more guys? I mean, they're on the roster. Why not dress them?
I would have liked to see Christian McCaffrey for one series of quarterback.
It would have been fun. Would have been fun.
Sure, he could have done something. The problem is you don't have him in the backfield anymore.
That's it. And that's what I said is, okay, you take him out of his best position, then make him play quarterback. And the Wildcat works for like one play when they're not expecting it. But no,
I mean him in as a quarterback, not as a Wildcat.
No, but that's basically what it would have been. He just would have been running the Wildcat the whole time. So
yeah, I would have preferred to see him actually, under center and do some stuff. I mean, I don't know what his arm is like, but when a guy is a baller and when a guy is a gamer and when a guy is that type of player, a Julian Edelman type of player, I think he can make some plays. I would have liked to see that. Who knows what the conversation was like on the sideline. He didn't look like he looked pretty surprised. Let's just say that when he was changing helmets for a quick second.
Yeah, for a quick second.
Yeah.
Now let's in case people missed the news yesterday, Brock Purdy ended up with a partially torn ulnar collateral.
Yeah, UCL. He's going to be out 6 months.
So basically, what that is when a guy gets Tommy John surgery, when a pitcher gets Tommy John surgery, now his isn't completely torn. They're hoping they can just do some minor surgery. Well, it's not minor, but surgery to reattach it a little bit. He won't need full Tommy John surgery, which is where they actually, get a ligament from your leg and they put it in your arm. That sets you back even more than 6 months. But yeah, he'll likely be out 6 months, which is too bad because it was such a great story, Jason. And there's a low part of you, whether you hate the 49ers, love the 49ers. Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl would have been a great story.
Well, he's from there, and he was Mr. Irrelevant in the draft, the last guy.
Right, and playing in his hometown for the Super Bowl, but it wasn't meant
to
be.
It's funny because we joke about how Arizona's probably going to play Sean Miller in the second round, but you do look for those types of matchups. And here you have Andy Reid going up against his old coach, his old owner, and Jeffrey Lurie. And you've got the Kelsey brothers going up against each other. So sometimes these stories just kind of find each other.
They really do. By the way, Matt Bushman, the tight end on the practice squad for the 49ers, is a Sabino grad. So we do have one player, practice squad for the Chiefs. We do have one player who's pseudo in the Super Bowl, at least.
Yeah, I got to find out if he's available to talk. I remember him going to some high school games at Sabino and him being there, and he was
he went to BYU.
A legitimate prospect. Yeah. I forget whether he was like looking at BYU or Utah.
He went to BYU. Yeah,
BYU. Okay, yeah. He was looking at BYU at the time. It was a while ago at Sabino. I do remember that. So sometimes these storylines kind of find each other. Brock Purdy, though, it's going to be. It's not like he's going to have to battle for the starting quarterback position next year, and that's if they don't bring in a definite QB. Anyway, before we get to Arizona basketball, I want to stay with something else while I'm still a little fired up, Pat, and that has to do with Scott Rowland in the Hall of Fame. And if you notice on the K-Gun 9 News last week when he was, by the way, I'm Jason Barr, joined by Pat Parris here on the Huddle. You can comment in if you agree, disagree with that, or whatever. Scott Rowland named the Hall of Fame. I didn't even do the story on the news. Obviously, we focus on local news, but there's some national stuff that you just put in, right? And you know what? The Hall of Fame's not the Hall of Fame to me anymore. It just isn't. And it was going in that direction, Pat, and you're a baseball guy, so I want to get your take on this. It was going in that direction for several years. And then last year when Harold Baines got in, I was like, forget it. Yeah, to put in Scott Rowland, a career, I know he's got some gold gloves, a career 281 hitter who only once in his career was even in the top 10 in the NL MVP voting? What? This guy's not a Hall of Fame baseball player. That's not even close to being a Hall of Fame baseball player. So you got guys making apologies like, okay, he could be on the bottom wing. No, for him to be in the same Hall of Fame as Mike Schmidt, that's a Hall of Fame baseball player. That's terrible. The Hall of Fame is, you know what? It's not the Hall of Fame to me anymore. I'm sorry. Hall of Very Good.
While I understand your skepticism about Scott Rowland, in fairness, on the Cardinals broadcast team, I covered Scott Rowland winning 2 World Series.
Yes, you're biased. That's fine.
So I'm not going to use my bias, Cardinal colored glasses, as I always say. I'm just going to go to some stats real quick. Not going to bore everybody. Not everybody's into sabermetrics. Not everybody understands sabermetrics. So I'll make it real quick. WAR is a sabermetrics stat that it's wins above replacement. So in other words, if you got hurt, Jason, and you were the third baseman, and they put in the average guy, and the average guy is 0, how many wins are they going to lose out on? Or if they have the average guy and they put you in at third base, how many more wins are you going to get this team? Over his career, Scott Rowland was at 73.4, meaning that he was worth 73 wins more than the average third baseman at that position.
That doesn't make any sense, Pat. So instead of winning 90 games, the team would only won 17 games.
No, that means
whatever. You know what I mean.
Every and some of the greatest players and that whoever play the game have a WAR of 80, 75, 70. He's right in the middle of where all of the great all of the great players are. And at third base, he's actually exactly where guys like George Brett are at. And I'm going to use George Brett because George Brett growing up was my favorite player.
That's
favorite
a Hall of Fame baseball player.
George Brett. He has the same WAR as George Brett. Guess what? Among third baseman all time, he has 1 less home run than George Brett. He has the stats are remarkable, but between him and George Brett, they have basically the same amount of gold gloves. I can tell you this.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop here for a second. Let me jump in here for a second.
Okay.
And here's why I'm okay with George Brett going in and not so okay with Scott Rowland going in. For a player who has unremarkable stats, or maybe not the stats of heroic stats, what I then will also think of a little bit is how much star power the player has. George Brett had star power. Dale Murphy, who's not in the Hall of Fame, major star power. I'm fine with him getting in. I'd even be fine with Don Mattingly getting in. The problem is he was only great for not that many years. But those guys had star power, right? Those are star baseball players. Nobody ever went to the ballpark saying, "I'm going to see Scott Rowland play. Scott Rowland's in town."
No, I think you're wrong. I think you're underestimating how big a name he was for the time period we're talking about.
Maybe in St. Louis,
2000 to 2000. They won two World Series, and he was. So this is going to be my next argument because I know stats bore you and you don't really care.
No, I love stats.
But
I love stats. What are you talking
Scott
about?
Rowland didn't get a lot of votes for NL MVP all the time because he was the third best player on his team.
So the third best player on your team's not a Hall of Fame.
So every time Albert Pujols barely lost, you know how many MVPs Albert Pujols should have won, and he won 2. He should have won 5 or 6, but he kept splitting the vote with Yadier Molina and Scott Rowland. So those 3 guys, the triumphant of the Cardinals, won 2 World Series and dominated the 2000s in the National League. And Scott Rowland was a huge part of that. And my last point is this: defense matters, Jason. And even if you put a guy in for his defense only, this guy's worth it on his defense only. Here's a quote: Mike Schmidt, 10 gold gloves. Remember him?
Don't compare Mike Schmidt to
Said in
Scott Rowland.
2004 to that Scott Rowland is, quote, better than me at third base. I'm not saying.
Yeah, that's Mike Schmidt being a classy guy.
Then
That's
okay,
Mike Schmidt being a classy
Tony
guy.
Tony
That's
La
all that
Russa.
is.
Tony La Russa. He said,
That's his manager. His manager's going.
I told him once my happiest days if we had 27 ground balls to third base in a game because it's an automatic out. He was that good, Jason. He was phenomenal at third base, and he was a very good hitter.
He's not a Hall of Fame,
very good hitter. I think
very good.
I'll be honest. I think he's right on the fringe. The fact,
and here's the other thing, Pat. How does he go from getting 10% of the vote 3 years ago or whatever it was to now he gets the vote?
Well, I think
like 10% of the
if
vote.
You want to talk,
if
you want to have the conversation about where the Hall of Fame is gone, which you started this whole discussion with, that's fine. We can have that discussion. But in this day and age where you're so worried about steroids and which guys were on performance and insurance, which ones weren't, Scott Rowland checks all the boxes that he was, a clean player. He was a great defensive player, and he was a very good offensive player. That's what gets you in the Hall now.
Was he a good guy? Was he a good guy?
He's a good guy. Yeah, he was a good guy.
Yeah, see, that's it. Harold Baines was a great guy. That's why he's going in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose is not a good guy. So that's why he's not in the Hall of Fame.
And I also I'll say this, Jason. It helped that he started his career in Philadelphia, and they loved him in Philadelphia too. You have East Coast writers that like you and enjoyed covering you. Then you go to St. Louis, the mecca of baseball in the Midwest, and you get covered there, and you do well, and you win 2 World Series, and you're going to get in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's just the way it is.
All right. So before we we still got a few minutes here. We got to touch, of course, on Arizona basketball, a big thing in Tucson, of course, and now the team back up ranked fifth. To me, what impressed me about the Wildcats this past week was how well they did against Washington's zone defense, and I like the way how when they see a team a second time, they seem to do much better against that team. And I think that says something for the coaching, and that does make me feel a little bit better about the team. Plus, they've shown they can win a couple of different ways. My concern still is, they're one injury away from disaster. They're playing 7 guys. Courtney Ramey and Cedric Henderson Jr. are very inconsistent offensively. I know they do some other good things, and Kerr's even inconsistent offensively. Say what you want, all that. They still only have lost 3 times all year, and they're 5th in the country.
That's right. And they've avenged one of their losses, and they'll have a chance to avenge another one on Thursday. I think what you have to say as well, Jason, is yes, we saw a little bit more offensively. We're starting to see that come back around. And I think we both wanted to see that. But I still get back to, we've seen about 5 games in a row now where their defense has been really good. I think what they've learned, and Tommy Lloyd's learned this maybe the hard way, and I'll give you credit for being the one that was harping on this earlier in the year. They do so much switching that a lot of times they leave guys wide open for threes. That happened when Washington was here, or Washington State was here.
Funny you say that. Thanks for saying that. That's funny because Tommy Lloyd mentioned that in the post game.
That's what I was going to say. He said, we did less switching. And what you can help a guy, but that doesn't necessarily mean you got to leave your own guy all alone wide open for a 3. And when you face teams that have guys that can hit 3s, and let's face it, almost every team you're going to face when you're in a Power 5 conference has guys that can hit wide open 3s. And I think they've recognized the fact of we need to switch when we can in a hurry, but we're not going to do this stuff where we try to double team and sag off a player and leave them wide open at the 3-point line. We just can't do that. It cost them last year some. It cost them a lot when they were having their struggles this year. And I think they've learned, and give the coaching staff credit that they're identifying things midseason that they need to do better and maybe changing a scheme a little bit, and they did.
And now just a half a game back of UCLA.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Boy, did they leapfrog a whole bunch of teams, and ASU has gone from red hot to ice cold. And what you want to see now as a fan is Arizona be playing UCLA for the Pac-12 championship regular season. I think it's the 6th of May. I might be off by a day or 2, but basically the last game of the regular season.
Yeah, March. This is the last game of March. It's the 4th of March.
Yeah, last game of the regular season.
Regular season, yeah. The tournament starts on the 8th.
You want that game to be for the Pac-12 regular season title, and you know what? They'll probably play each other a third time in the possibly play each other a third time in the Pac-12.
Well, yeah, I would think that's a decent chance of that happening as long as everything falls into place. But first things first, you got an Oregon team that, Jason, they're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They're basically almost unbeatable at home, and then on the road, you just don't know what you're going to get. Let's hope that Arizona's ready, which you'd think they would be, and that it hasn't been that long ago that they played Oregon. It was the 14th of January, so got to be fresh.
That was the first time where I was really annoyed by the Oregon court.
It's hard to watch.
There was a couple times where I didn't follow the ball.
Yeah, it's too busy. It's just too busy. There ought to be some kind of NCAA regulations on what you can have on the court, and the half court logos, Jason, now basically stretch from the sideline to the sideline. At mid court, the giant whatever mascot you got.
Yeah. So we'll see how they do against the Oregon schools this week, and hopefully they can avenge that loss. All right, shout out to Andy Lopez, former University of Arizona baseball coach, being inducted into the College Baseball Hall of Fame this weekend. We'll have that tonight at 6 o'clock on K-Gun News, and we'll make our Super Bowl predictions next week. No reason to do it now.
No.
We'll be here next week and can think about it a little bit more, and we'll have that. We'll have that next week. I'll get honest with you, Pat. I'm not great. I missed a number of Super Bowls. I think it's hard sometimes when you're rooting for a team, and sometimes you're like, they can't win. You pick the other team. Sometimes I pick the team that I'm not rooting for. So we'll see. We'll see about.
We'll see about that. I think you're kind of right there, Jason. When you don't have a dog in the fight, when you don't have a team that you really,
I'm better.
Your team, it's your team. There's a lot of bias that you have against teams or against conferences or against divisions, and all of a sudden it slants what you're going with.
Yeah, I'm just leaning on that Eagles defense right now. That's where I'm thinking.
Defense
right
wins championships. Yeah, that's what they always say. Although I think the Chiefs may have already won a Super Bowl without a great defense, but we'll see.
All right, we got to wrap this up.
All right. Thanks for joining us on the Huddle on K-Gun 9 streaming platforms. We'll see you next week.